You're with the briefing from BBC News. The headlines: hopes are growing for a breakthrough in trade talks between the US and Canada. Officials say negotiations are at a very intense moment. The IMF's pledged to step up support for Argentina and speed up crisis talks after the country's economy slumped to a new low. The UN Human Rights Commissioners condemned Myanmar's de facto leader Aung San Suu Kyi for failing to help Rohingya Muslims, claiming she's a spokesperson for the Myanmar military. Let's look at some of those stories in detail and others in the media. So we start with the front page of The Times, leading with French President Emmanuel Macron, who's preparing to throw the UK Prime Minister a lifeline, apparently, by pushing other EU leaders to agree a close relationship with Britain after Brexit. Business section of The Telegraph looks at Argentina, where the government, as we've mentioned, has asked for the early release of critical bailout money from the IMF amid the growing crisis there. President Mauricio Macri said the move was designed to restore confidence in the economy. The Guardian, also business pages, the iconic UK luxury car maker and favourite of 007 spy James Bond, Aston Martin, they've brushed off concerns over Brexit, announcing plans to press ahead with a market flotation in London that some say would value the luxury car maker at around $6.5 billion. Sports pages in The Independent, tennis officials at the US Open have been accused of sexist double standards after the French female player Alizé Cornet was warned of unsportsmanlike behaviour because she adjusted her top during a match at the tournament. Many male players, of course, take their tops off and sit there with nothing on from the waist up, so they don't get criticised, but women do. And then finally, BBC News Online, commuters are so regularly using their travel time to do work email, that their journeys should be counted as part of their working day, according to researchers. Wider access to Wi-Fi and the speed of mobile phones means we work for a lot longer. We've asked for your opinions on this. You've not held back. We'll get to those in a moment, but first, here's Cornelia. She is back to talk us through some of those other stories. If we start with the front page of The Times, make a deal with Britain, Macron tells EU leaders. What is he going to say?
Well, look, if you look at Macron, if you look at the French economy, if you look at French agriculture, they really need the UK market. If you look at the security cooperation between the UK and France, that's very important. And apparently Theresa May has had a good meeting with him during her break in his, residence during his break. And he's going to say, look, let's make a deal. And I think that's the consensus that's emerging. Did you see yesterday Dominique Raab came out and said, yes, we are probably missing the deadline of October. It will probably slip into November, but we are getting closer to a deal. Then yesterday also Michel Barnier spoke in Berlin and said, look, we're actually quite close to a deal, the pound went up on that. But Michel Barnier said one thing where we should be careful. And he took, again, a line from Theresa May. He said, single market means single market. Reminds me of Brexit means Brexit. But it seems to be that the consensus is, yes, it will overrun a bit, but it just, for the common good of everybody, we've got to get there.
Maybe they're all sharing the same speechwriter at the moment, or something like that behind the scenes. But in terms of Emmanuel Macron, what the Times is saying, and they've said they've got, diplomatic sources who've told them this at the Times, that, the French president will use a summit in Austria next month to spell out what he calls a new structure for Europe. And he's going to be talking about
concentric
circles where you've got the EU in the middle,
and then you have the other.
You've got an outer circle in which Britain will be in there. I mean, this is all part of. He's talked about this since before he was elected.
Absolutely.
And since he's got this vision about Europe.
He has this vision.
He wants to reform Europe.
He wants to reform Europe. He wants to make Europe actually stronger, more knitted and tighter. And there he may have a problem because not everybody in Europe sees it that way. Talk to Viktor Orban.
Don't.
Yeah, many don't. So that's he's very much on the Juncker line, ever closer integration. That he may not get there, but the concentric circles do make sense for the UK to be in that orbit somewhere, and there seems to be a consensus emerging. So let's pray for the best.
We've talked already about Argentina. It's in the Telegraph, but I just want to ask you one question and then we can move on. You know, Argentina has gone from one economic crisis to another. It's a boom and bust story because
it's once a decade they default.
Between the crises, there's this huge surge and boom, and they're bouncing back. I mean, is this cycle ever going to come to an end, do you think?
Well, I think this may actually be an opportunity to put the right measures in place to get this cycle to come to an end. But in the meantime, it will be very painful, because if you look at it, the IMF program will make them get rid of things like subsidies on water, subsidies on energy, on heating. So it will get very, very costly for the individual householder. I mean, the middle class has been suffering and is suffering. In these things, it's always the middle classes that suffer.
Now, cool as Bond, Aston Martin shrugs off the spectre of Brexit. It's going to float on financial markets. I have to say, I'm going to plug another programme I present with Ben Thompson. We had Andy Palmer, the CEO of Aston Martin, on Business Live, which is 8:30 in the morning on the BBC. Tune in later. And he talked all about this flotation to us. And we grilled him a bit about Brexit, what his thinking was, because he was actually headhunted from Nissan to join Aston Martin in 2014, and since he joined, actually, Aston Martin has...
Yeah, well, he has turned it around from loss-making to profit-making. And I think, well, you know, when you look at him, he says, OK, Brexit is not really that important for me. Only 25% of my cars are sold there. But he has a supply chain from there. 2/3 of his parts come from there.
He does, but he was explaining to us that his exposure is not as great as the exposure of, say, Nissan, Toyota, others.
But
and he was saying he's actually quite concerned about the car manufacturing industry in the UK in general, not so much Aston Martin.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the figures would go. Aston Martin is going gangbusters, but if you look at cars manufactured in the UK, they went down by 11% year on year this year. He's taking a leaf from the playbook of Ferrari, because they floated, and since floating, their stock has appreciated 144%. So let's hope. Just one quick thing: when he says he's not exposed, 2/3 of his parts come from the EU. He says he will increase the time of warehousing these parts from 3 to 5 days. I've sort of done a back of the envelope calculation. That could mean that some of his costs can go up between 20 and 30%.
So that a little bit of free consultancy for Aston Martin there from Cornelia on the BBC. Let's have a look at the photo. I love it. The Aston Martin next to James Bond is such a cool car. I love the Aston Martin car to look at. I haven't got one, I wish. But they've only sold... Well, I was just going to ask you, because in their 150-year history, they've sold... around about 4,000 Aston Martins to women. Women don't really buy them, apparently.
Well, you see, I don't drive.
You don't drive. I think so that's wasted on you, Cornelia, isn't it?
It's totally wasted on me.
Should we move on? Do you play tennis?
No, I don't play tennis.
Oh, my goodness. I play tennis. I can afford tennis. I can't afford an Aston Martin. Elise Cornet, so she had a problem with her top.
Yeah,
it was on the wrong way around. She took it off. She had completely brilliant underwear on underneath. You know, no exposure, indecent exposure, and yet she gets... huge criticism from the authorities who run the US Open.
But they called back the umpire. You know, he tried to penalise her, and in the end, the authorities, they called him back. But there is that thing: are women treated the same way as men in sports? And
no.
You know, there was the big thing about pay.
No.
And clearly not. But you know, this is really a storm in a teacup. I mean, if this is our only problem, God, the world is in good shape.
Let's move on then to the other, you might think, a storm in a teacup, because this story is about emails while commuting. They should count as work according to researchers, because I must admit, when I'm on a train, everybody seems to be working around me. You strike me, you run your own business as a complete workaholic. I think you just work all the time.
Yes, I am very strong in the work-work balance.
Yeah, exactly. You work. So, I mean, should it be counted as work for those who work for other people, unlike you who work for yourself?
No, I don't think it should be counted as work, but I think we have to look into how we look at compensation overall, because it's not just what you do on the train, it's also what you do at home. What do we do? When we wake up, the first thing is we take
holiday?
Yeah. I write, I work.
Exactly. But what I mean is,
but I mean, we need to look at it.
People are not able to remove themselves from their work
and we
life.
need to look at things like work-life balance, and we need to look. I'm for work-work balance, and we need to look at how to compensate people in the line that they work all the time.
All right. Some viewer thoughts on this. So we've heard from many people. Peter Stevenson says, you should not work on your way to work. Certainly not. Empty your inbox at work or stay behind until you do. McClay says, don't know about you, but we have sought a departmental WhatsApp group. It's really important that work emails and information will spill over there, and at any time are discussed there. And that is work as well. Cornelia, thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
We'll see you very soon. Bye-bye.